Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are taking a look at Tiny Epic Crimes. This is the latest from Gamelin Games and Scott Alms. This one is a bit of a deduction game, a bit of a race game. You're really trying to run around like 1920s mobster-ridden city, collecting evidence to try to find a murderer.
Yeah, that's kind of what kicks off this game. A murder has happened, and you play as detectives with 48 hours to solve the case. And that 48 hours is actually kind of built into the game mechanically because this game uses a time track to track all of your actions. Every action you take in the game, whether it be driving around the city in your police cruiser, whether it be arresting or investigating, everything you're doing is going to take a number of time tokens. And so that's something that you're going to hear us use a lot is that concept of time, and you're spending those hours to try to solve this crime, really by trying to figure out who the murderer is from this giant stack of suspect cards. And you have to do that by moving around this board, doing a lot of like the typical actions you might think a detective would do over the course of trying to solve a crime. Yeah,
so what we have here on the table, I'll go through that really quick, and then Ryan will give you an overview. We've got the variable map here. The headquarters is always going to be in the center, but the rest of these cards you see here are shuffled up and randomly put out there. Again, much like a lot of the Tiny Epic games, it brings in a lot of variability for that replayability. So you've got all of those. Then you're going to put these tokens out here. These are for the various things you can do. You've got some investigate crime scene tokens, some stakeout tokens. You've got tokens around the outer edge, these dice tokens, which are going to effectively, there will be dice rolled to determine where things go effectively. So in sort of battleship format, you're going to roll a 3 and a 4, so maybe a mobster will go here, things like that. Each player is going to have a patrol car here, that's what they're going to be using to move around the board. Then we've also got some cards around here. We've got event cards, which we'll talk about more later, but those are a really interesting sort of living aspect of the game. Force cards, which are effectively abilities that you can do, and you might be able to get more force cards, but every player is going to start with one. You've got some various tokens, and then over here you've got a lot of interesting things. One are those suspects that Ryan mentioned. One of these is the murderer. And in fact, you're going to take one of the cards at random, without looking at the back, I'll show you, and put it in this murder envelope here. This murder envelope is unique in that it doesn't have any windows on the back. All of these other envelopes you see here are for various types of evidence that you're going to collect. You've got forensics, rank, getaway, weapon gang. These are all aspects of the suspect. So when you find out some of the information about them, you're going to put them in these envelopes, and this little red window is going to kind of show through the back of that card to give you a little bit of information so you can effectively rule out giant swatches of information. So, you know, they might be one of two different gangs. You might be able to rule out one of those. So now you've narrowed the search down to who the suspect is.
Yeah, a lot of that is going to be done by collecting those tokens like David mentioned, but also by using things like those force cards you collect and by completing events. Events are something that I think are very interesting in this game because they're all like little mini games that are going to help you out. They're going to help you by getting some suspect cards where if you draw a suspect card into your hand, well, then you know that that suspect is not the murderer because they're not in the sleeve because they're in your hand. You're going to get some abilities like rank on your character sheet here. Rank is important because not only does it unlock some new abilities for you, it's also a tiebreaker. So if multiple people find the murderer correctly, you're going to look at your rank. And again, you're going to be just trying to deduce with all this information on the back of this card here. And they do give you a player aid that's going to show you every possible suspect. So trying to be the one to complete those events is important, but these events really kind of change up the game in a variety of different ways. And so you're going to see some tokens out there that are going to come out because of the events. And you might have some different markers come out on the time track, some different tokens come out on the board, and it makes you think about the game a little differently or do a little bit different actions over the course of the game.
Yeah, I would say before we get into the overview of the turn, I do want to highlight that event thing a little bit more too. It really gives a lot of flavor to the game. These are wildly different, and the game starts with one. So when you set up the game, you're going to draw one event, and you're going to put it in one of the 3 events slots. In fact, you can have up to 3 at one time, and these events kind of change things. They apply some new rules, but they also give all the players an opportunity to achieve another unique variable thing in order to get some of those things Ryan mentioned. This one is Arsonist at Large, We put out fire tokens, again, rolling dice to determine where they went. And then there's a rule here in terms of spreading the fire. When mobsters are added to the board, if they're added near fire, they're going to spread the fire. And the goal is to put out the fire. So if you're in one of those spaces, you can spend 1 unit of time to put out the fire. And then once all the fire is put out, that person's going to be able to gain a suspect card, which is, again, one of those abilities where you can take this and at least rule out one specific suspect.
Now, a lot of the actions you're taking, and there are quite a few, you're going to see all the actions broken down in your player aid. All of these actions are about moving around this board and interacting with these different tokens. Each one of these different tokens represents some information, like David said, like you can get some forensics information, you can do a stakeout to determine their getaway vehicle, you can shake down some informants, or you can find some witnesses to talk to. All of that stuff is going to be done. And each one of these different pieces of evidence kind of has a threshold for completion.
Yeah.
So for example, this gang piece of evidence here says, as soon as you discover 5 witnesses, whoever discovered the 5th witness gets to take this and look at that murderer card and determine which gang the person is from. If you looked at the player aid, you see there's 2 gangs. So boom, you've eliminated an entire gang. So you're starting to see how looking at these envelopes is going to help you deduce the information about who the murderer is.
And the cool thing there is all the players are contributing to that. So as long as you're the last player to finally get that last piece of information that crosses that threshold, you're the one that has that information. So you're going to have that information until other people interact with you in order to get it. But all along, those other players and you yourself are trying to gather these other pieces as well. Because once you can get, if you can get 4 of these, you'll pretty much know who the murderer is.
Effectively rule it out. But anyone that helped contribute still gets to draw suspect cards. So there's still reasons to contribute to some of these, even if somebody else gets that final piece, because there's another key part in completing an event. If you're the one that completes an event, you get to look at somebody else's evidence that they've discovered.
Yeah.
And so as long as somebody has figured out the gang, you can also figure out the gang, and that will help you deduce things. So the way that you take these actions is so important. And now that you kind of know what the actions do, or your kind of your goal, let's talk a little bit about how that action system works. Because for me, I think this is the most interesting and innovative part of the game.
Yeah, there is a daytime and a nighttime, and this is the competitive version of the game that we're talking about. You can play co-op, but in the competitive version, there are a few of those actions that can happen in the daytime, and if you see here on the time track, there are some spaces that are in daytime and some that are nighttime. At the beginning of your turn, if you're in daytime, you can catch an informant, search a scene, or call for backup. If it's nighttime, you can't do those things, because if it's nighttime, you can catch a witness, stakeout, or bring someone in for holding. And then, of course, you can always drive and you can always simply arrest. But these things are going to be how you puzzle together your turn. Because when you move, you're moving orthogonally, and when you move your car piece, it's going to be 1 time unit for each space that you move orthogonally. And then all of these various actions take anywhere between 1 and maybe 2 or 3.
Up to even 5.
Up to 5, depending on what actions you're taking. More time. So if you spend a lot of time, you can go from day to night before you know it. And if you do that, you've just got to know the next turn you take, you're doing nighttime actions. You're not doing the daytime actions. And it's very challenging because searching a scene, collecting these pieces of information, that's for forensics. If you get yourself in a nighttime, you're not going to be able to progress. Now, every other player at the table is going to know that, so then they might be able to go, oh, okay, well, he's out of the running on forensics at least for a turn, maybe 2. I'm going to focus on that on my turn. So you definitely want to take advantage of what's going on here. And this works like many other games. The person who's going to be furthest back is always going to go first. So if you do small little actions, particularly taking advantage of not moving very far and taking advantage of opportunities that are close to your car, you're going to be able to make maybe an action, maybe 2 actions in a row before other players get their turn again.
Yeah, it's kind of like patchwork in that, you know, the whole idea of like timing your action so that you get to go multiple turns in a row is great, but sometimes like it just pays. If you can get the last piece of evidence that gives you one of those evidence cards, and even if it means you have to drive across the whole city and spend 6 or 7 actions to get there, maybe it's worth it, but you know you're giving your opponents maybe 2 or 3 extra actions because you took that. And, you know, that action might have pushed you now into nighttime, which means now you can't take daytime actions. In addition, you'll see these lines across this board that feature the event icon. every time you pass one of those lines, the first person to pass one adds a new event, which means as you pass by that, you're putting out another event that will potentially give the other players something to do on their turn to earn rank or to suspect cards or to get more force cards, which give you just a variety of really cool powers. And so all of that timing goes into your decision of what action you want to take on the game. And I think that that is the most interesting and most puzzly part of this game, is looking at that board and saying, well, if I do this action, I can really benefit, but yet I'm still one space behind the next player, and then I immediately get to go again. And finding those moments is a very satisfying experience.
Right, and like Ryan said, you could see an event come up that may be pretty far across the board, but it's an event that's going to give you a rank that you really want. And again, if you finish an event, you're going to be able to look at someone's evidence. You might go for broke and spend a ton of time to get over there and achieve it, knowing that you're going to be waiting for your next turn a little bit, but then you're going to have a little bit more information. It might be the last bit of information you need. Mentioning this, the last bit of information you need, you're going to want to get that before you get here towards the end.
The last 6 hours.
In the last 6 hours of the time track, that is when you can actually choose to stop. You can actually take your car off the board, say, I'm going to stop. I've made my decision. And then you wait for the rest of the players to finish. This is not like one of those games where someone guesses, they go, oh, I was wrong, and then they're out.
Right.
Everyone waits until the end of the game, and then everyone takes a guess. Whether they know or not, they can take a guess. And if it's just one player who knew it, they win. If there's ties, there's some tiebreakers. The other interesting thing here is with the time track, with the events, with the mobsters that are going to come out on the board, which, by the way, is going to happen at the end of every player's turn. You're going to roll dice, and another mobster is going to come out. Potentially not, but in most cases it will happen. If you don't have mobsters in the bag and you need to draw one, if more than 3 events come out, you're going to just start losing suspects off the top of this deck. Now, that's not a huge loss of information, but it is a little bit of information.
It can add up.
Yes.
Because the chances, like David said earlier, if we can get 4 pieces of information locked down, then you know who the murderer is.
Yeah.
But there's only so many ways to earn those. And so, especially in higher player counts, you might only get 3 pieces of information. 2 or 3, which means maybe you're looking at a 25 to 50% chance of knowing who it is just based on the evidence. Therefore, trying to get as many of those suspect cards as possible, having a handful of suspect cards is just as good as having evidence.
Yeah.
Because you're narrowing down a lot of people. So if it's a 50-50, David and I both have it down to 50-50, but I have more suspect cards, there's a higher chance that I know who the murderer actually is versus David.
Yeah, and all of this happens in about 30, 45 minutes.
Right, as you'd expect from Tiny Epic.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a very fast-playing game. It gives you that feeling of deduction, but not so much in the, well, if this is this and this is this, then this must be this way. It's really more about a process of elimination, kind of like what you'd expect with detective work.
Right.
You're like ruling out, okay, oh, well, it's a knife and it's not a gun. Well, then that rules out all these people that carry guns instead of knives. And you keep doing that until you whittle it down to, hopefully, just one suspect that you know. But if not, like we said, maybe a couple, and then you're taking a guess, or maybe using some of those suspects to really narrow it down.
Yeah, and that's basically how the game is played. And before we go, though, I do want to mention, and we alluded to this, there is also a cooperative mode.
Yeah.
And cooperative mode is actually quite different because you're working together to solve the murder, and each of the player cards has only some actions you can take. And so that actually leans very heavily on the teamwork aspect because you need to help each other, set each other up to be able to do the actions that you can do on your turn.
Yeah, so for example, my character has the catch informant action, but I don't think yours does on that section. So you're really kind of like leaning into your roles like many other games do, but in a way that you really have to puzzle it together. I think the divvying up of these actions for the characters is really what makes the co-op that much more of a puzzle.
Well, yeah, and it definitely takes away that alpha gamer aspect of like, I can't just do everything myself.
Exactly.
Like, I literally can't.
A little bit, for sure.
You have to help other people and let other people make the decisions about what they're doing on their board. But it is great that they have a different mode for people that like to solve together.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing with your family or people that maybe aren't going to figure out the deduction stuff as easily, like when you're playing with your kids. It's great to have that co-op mode as well.
Yeah, and speaking of family and kids, one of the cool aspects, these little, I mean, if you're ever around with little secret finders and secret codes, they've got these little red transparent sheets in these envelopes and with this piece right here. So the act of like getting that information is a very fun tactile experience too.
It is.
So that is Tiny Epic Crimes. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.
Bye.